Currie grew up in the 1970s and 80s in what was then a tightly knit Franco-American community in Waterville. He spent a lot of his time with his grandmother, who would smoke and drink coffee and spend hours talking with other women in the neighborhood.
That grandmother inspired the female crime boss at the heart of his new novel, The Savage, Noble Death of Babs Dion. It is a deeply personal book, and while it's fiction, not fact, the only way Currie could write it was by tapping into a world he grew up in, now a world gone by.
You've been a writer for a long time, but this is your first deep dive into writing about your hometown.
For sure.
Why did you want to write about it?
There's a character in the book, Father Clement, and he talks about when he ministers to the dying, the one thing that they always want to do is go back to the house that they grew up in. And that really stuck with me. I very much went home with this book, and I think that's part of the reason why people are responding to it so powerfully, because everything in it is completely authentic and from the heart.
When Ron Currie was growing up in Waterville, the city had a well-defined Franco community. He tapped into his memories of that time and place to create this novel.
Were you just like raring to sit down and get writing, or were you a little wary of trying to tackle a subject, or at least a setting, that is so emotionally rich in both good and bad ways?
Absolutely, both, really. I fully am aware and accept that just about every person of Franco extraction in this state is going to disagree with how I told this story, and that's fine, so long as we're actually talking about our heritage and not just ignoring it or pretending that it is passed entirely into history, you know?
And it kind of goes beyond that. I think there are a lot of people in Waterville who are going to be pissed off at the way you write about the city in this book.
Probably. You know, I mean, one of the things that always happens with novels is people struggle to make the distinction between fiction and nonfiction, right? And this is very much fiction. I mean, it's a made-up story that I've laid over the very real, very true-to-life experiences that I had as a kid, which included, I think, the legacy of the way that Franco-Americans were treated in this state.
The savage, noble death of Babs Dion is set against a backdrop of decades of discrimination against Franco-Americans. To name just one example, until the 1960s, state law prohibited speaking French in public schools in Maine.
It was literally illegal to speak French. And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
This is a dive into a darker, criminal world that you had not explored. What was it about that that intrigued you?
It started with a story I was told by a relative of mine about how in the 50s, and probably before then, the Waterville PD, speaking of getting myself into trouble, the Waterville PD all had key rings that had the key to every business downtown. So they could let themselves in and out whenever they wanted, ostensibly to make sure everything was fine.
Security checks.
Security checks. But this relative, who I shall not name, told me that one of her uncles, so my great uncle, I guess, was a cop, and whenever she got a Christmas gift for him, she always knew it was stolen, because that's what the cops were doing, or some of them anyway. They would help themselves to whatever they wanted, and it was just the price of doing business. And oftentimes it was Franco-owned businesses that were being stolen from. So that's in the book as well.
You'd been sitting in that chair for, I think, about 45 seconds when you said, "This is the first time I've seen the hardcover." What is it like when an author holds his precious child for the first time?
Well, I can't really say what it's like because I would have to use expletives, but it's scary. You know, one of the tricks that it's scary and it's wonderful and it's surreal to have this thing that lives in your head for so long. One of the tricks that I play on myself when I'm writing, and I especially did it with this because of the subject matter, is I pretend in a way that convinces me that nobody else is ever going to read it. And so that trick persists, the effect of that trick persists until the book shows up. And then I'm like, oh God,
now you got nowhere to hide.
But I've got no choice. It's, you know, the wheels are in motion.
Would you say this is the best thing you've ever written?
Yes, unequivocally. And I said that well before the reviews started coming out.
Before they started confirming that.
Yeah. I just knew. Sometimes you just know.
If you would like to see Ron Currie talking about the savage, noble death of Babs Dion, he has an event coming up. He'll be at the Barnes & Noble bookstore in South Portland at 1 o'clock on Saturday.